citywide.
You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game, and we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have as our guest Alderman Scott Waguespack. He is a member of the Progressive Caucus. He was elected in 2007. He's in his 6th year. He's getting to be a veteran now. He's getting to be a veteran in child production. Just recently had your 2nd child, right?
Yes, thank you.
And he's married. How long have you been married?
5 years.
5 years, okay. He had Colorado State undergrad, Chicago Candle Law degree. He hasn't practiced law. He's well traveled, spent a lot of time in the Balkans when they were in the thick of things in the late 90s. And we're taping the show on April 13th, the year 2013. And Scott, what's the most important thing that's facing the City Council as we sit down for this interview on the 13th of April, 2013?
I think the most important thing right now is safety throughout the city of all the citizens. A lot of people out there have seen how much crime there's been and some of the issues popping up with that, whether it's related to schools, whether it's related to different neighborhoods throughout the city, whether it's my area or rougher parts of the city. But that, I would say crime and safety are probably the most important.
Your area is the 32nd Ward, right?
Yes.
So Lakeview, Roscoe Village, Ukrainian Village, Wicker Park, Goose Island, what am I leaving out? Bucktown. You live in Goose Island, right?
I live in Bucktown.
You live in Bucktown, okay.
And Logan Square. We just picked up Logan Square as well.
Okay. So your ward didn't change a lot in the redistricting that occurred in 2011, did it?
I picked up probably about 40% new area.
So that is significant.
Logan Square, and we picked up a lot of areas that had been marked out in the previous census.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being like Winnetka and 10 being the west side of Chicago, or at least portions of the west side or south side that are pretty unsafe, where would your ward, the 32nd Ward, be between the west side and the unsafe portions of the west side and south side, the safe, which is all of Winnetka, or Kenilworth,
yep,
or Wilmette, sort of the North Shore? Okay, they're a 1. We gave them very safe, so give them a 1. We give the south side and the west side portions not so safe a 10. Where's your ward?
Well, I think everybody wants to get to the 1 or 2.
Okay. Are you there, would you say?
No, I think we're probably, I would say 3 or 4.
Okay. But you're not, when you talk about violence and safety, you'd like to make your ward a little safer, but your main concern really is the violence that goes on the south side and the west side. Am I right on this square?
I would say that's correct. Yeah. I think what happens is if you have issues like that taking part in other parts of the city, it draws away from our ability to keep a lot of our people safe because you're pulling away officers, you're pulling away resources to tackle those issues, and it frankly leaves gaps in some other parts of the city.
And as the saying goes, if you've got a bad neighborhood, you should think about it because eventually that bad neighborhood will visit you.
That's correct.
When the kids from the south side, and they really are mostly from the south side or west side, come to the city, Michigan Avenue, and come and have one of these, what do they call them, flash mobs?
Flash mobs, yeah.
We're talking about kids coming from the south side and west side, right?
In large part, yeah.
And let's be blunt, these are mostly black kids, right?
That's true.
Okay. So, as some would say, there's nothing wrong with kids, black or white, Hispanic, green, whatever, Italian, coming to the city of Chicago, coming to Michigan Avenue, and being behaved.
Right.
But when they want to use it to engage in violence, when they want to intimidate people, when they want to do things that are illegal, then that's a problem.
You have to draw the line very quickly.
And then because, people have pointed out, even people who travel in Europe, these flash mobs, they start getting around there, and then people aren't going to visit the city as much. Chicago requires, for its livelihood, a good part of tourism, right?
That's correct.
So it hits the livelihood of people, it hits jobs, and there's spin-offs of other jobs. So in a sense, that bad neighborhood visits you. And when your kids from the North Shore decide they want to get some drugs, and they hear the place to get it is on the west side, and I don't mean marijuana, I mean like heroin or crack or whatever those kids get, they go to the west side, right?
It's problematic, yeah.
And when Alderman Bob Furietti says, I don't get it, when kids are, right now you're talking about closing schools, and he says, a lot of these closings result in a kid going from an unsafe, from his school where he's relatively safe to another school, so-called welcoming school, where he or she, the kids got to cross gang lines and they got to cross crack houses. Furietti says, I don't get it. If we can close schools, why can't we close the crack houses? You know Alderman Ferretti, right?
Yeah, in
Is he
fact,
part of your caucus, Progressive
he
Caucus?
is, yeah.
So did you hear Bob say that in Chicago tonight a few nights ago?
I just heard him say it this morning at a meeting that we
Okay.
hosted.
And did he get an answer from that meeting? Or did he give the answer? Do you have an answer for Bob Ferretti for that?
Well, I think the answer is, yeah, we need to close down those places.
But
We need-
why can't we? Nobody wants them. I don't think McCarthy, the police chief, wants them. I don't think Rahm Emanuel wants them. I don't think the city council wants them. So when you say, obviously we need to, why can't we?
Well, I think that part of it is there's no impetus from local leadership on it. Aldermen really have a lot of control in the ways that they can utilize the different city departments. The mayor does too. It's up to the aldermen, it's up to the communities, it's up to the neighbors to basically say, we want those things shut down. And sometimes you just can't get the behemoth that government is to really move in that direction.
Wait a second. Give me an idea, and I don't mean to, we have to get specific here.
It's okay.
Tell me a neighborhood where you think there's a crack house on the west side or the south side. Tell me that, alderman, and tell me why you think it's not happening. Is there a neighborhood that you can think of? You don't know specifically the address, but when we say crack house on the south or west side, give me an example of a neighborhood that might have a crack house.
Englewood.
Okay. And who's the alderman in Englewood?
Let's say it's Chandler for a portion of Englewood that you're looking
He
at.
just came in 2 years ago, right? Didn't he
Yes, he was
beat
in the last
somebody
election.
who'd been there for
4 years.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Chandler comes in, he finds there's a crack house in his ward in Englewood, and what? Does he just say, I don't care, or does he call up the police chief and say, let's close this thing down?
Well, I think, I haven't spoken to him personally about specific ones, but I've actually ridden my bike through some of those areas. I've driven through a lot of them. I've been with a lot of different people through those neighborhoods, and we call it out. To me, it doesn't matter if it's my neighborhood or somebody else's, but if I see something like that, I call it out. And I think,
When you say call it out, what does that mean?
Call the police, mark it down, make sure that the
So
commanders in
you've
the
done
area
that.
get it.
You've seen some crack houses,
Sure.
and you've called the police.
Yep.
And what's happened?
I think you get a response from the police of, yes, we'll go ahead and take care of that. A lot of times I think some of these fall through the cracks because, not a pun, but they fall through the crack because there are so many of them and there's so many other things going on that you can report something and it can sit there and stagnate literally for months or years without really having the impetus of the city, different departments going after them.
So it just doesn't happen. The police chief can't just go out there on his own and close it
Well,
down?
he can, but I
What
think
what-
the
if
way
he-
I
if
do
he,
it,
if he knows that it's going on, he's got a report. He goes out there. Not him personally, but he sends some police out there. They investigate. They find they do what they have to make a case. It's like watching Law and Order, right? They work with
Sure.
the state's attorney's office. It's a partnership, right? They work together. They arrest some people. They close it down.
that's what should be happening.
Now,
board it
just
up.
explain to me. I'm just missing it. Why is that not happening? It doesn't seem like brain surgery.
It doesn't.
So
yeah.
why isn't it happening? I still can't hear. I'm serious. I just don't hear why you think it hasn't happened.
I just think there's a lack of leadership coming from that specific locale that basically says that's going to be something I'm going to stay focused on like a laser beam.
So Chandler, your alderman, their alderman's got to stay focused. He's got to get community people to stay with him focused. He's got to be all over the
Community
police to make sure they do it.
Yeah.
The cops, the state's attorney's office.
Well, you
Like
can
an
use
all-
other departments as well. Like when I've had problems in my ward, I'll make sure the commander of the police district knows about it. I know the streets and sanitation building department. We pretty much put all the forces we can against any problematic.
We talked about this last week with Alderman Pawar, right? And I think basically he comes down on the view that we basically got to look at decriminalizing all of these drugs, not just marijuana, but crack and heroin and so forth. Because I think he would say, and I'm just extrapolating, he's not here, I would say, okay, so you do close it down, guess what? Somebody will open up another one 2 doors down.
Right.
And then it'll be another year process because there's money in this business. When you have something illegal that people want, learn that for prohibition,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
It is booze, and we basically gave up. If you legalize it, the cost of producing this stuff is nothing. It's all the risk why it's expensive. So the cost will go to zero. More people might use it. They'll kill themselves, but they won't kill others to get the money because they won't need much money, okay? And that's the best you can do. You can't make the world better for everybody. You don't want to encourage people to use these, but they will. You try to stop the ones you can. Would you agree with that? I mean, there are people who are coming around to this. This war on drugs has been going on now for what, like 60 years or so? And trust me, no matter how many busts you see on TV where like 200 pounds of marijuana, $400 million of this and that, they just keep coming back because
there's
money.
demand. Yeah, there's demand for it and there's money.
Demand creates its own supply, even for illegal things. And you can try to make it illegal, and they have, but people will take the risk and go around it. So you think maybe that's the answer?
Well, I think in part it could
Decriminalize all drugs.
No.
The answer?
No, I don't think it is.
Okay.
I think the city did decriminalize, in a sense, marijuana last year.
Okay.
I don't think that's had the great effect that we were looking for. It has reduced the number of police officer hours spent, but not dramatically.
So, but what's your answer if I say you close down that one crack house in Inglewood and 2 weeks later another opens up 2 blocks down the street?
Then you've got to hound the next place.
You just got to keep doing it until eventually you think you can persuade them not to open up. They'll go somewhere else. And maybe it'll be, and you don't want it in Chicago, so they'll go to another city and you say, not my problem, I don't care, they're out of Chicago.
Well, if everybody's working together on it, I think...
You think you can win the war on drugs?
No, not entirely.
Okay, but
I don't think...
Why do you want to keep doing it then?
I don't think decriminalizing every drug is the way it...
So what is the answer?
I think part of the answer is making sure you take away the need for it from a lot of people who are either hooked on it, they don't have the right resources to go to get away from that stuff. You know, families or mothers or fathers who are on it and spending money on drugs instead of on their kids, they get hooked on it. There has to be a social safety net there that helps them get out of it as well. I think you saw the same thing in Prohibition. You saw people that their families were being destroyed because they became
But we did
alcoholics.
legalize it there. We did legalize it. And
yeah, I think you're looking at. I don't think it's at the same level as cocaine, as heroin.
The usage is not the same, so you don't think.
And
you
the
have
effect.
to, yeah.
And the effect.
So, okay.
I don't have all the answers on it, but I think I agree with you on portions of it.
But you guys did we talked about this last week, you did just raise the funds for drinking and gambling and public urination and so forth. Were you thinking that's the broken glass theory of crime control? Start handling the small stuff and then eventually you get at the bigger stuff? You're familiar with that?
Yes.
You're familiar with that approach? That was the Rudy Giuliani approach in New York. You know, go after the small things.
The broken windows theory.
Broken windows, then you find somebody, you know, doing a robbery, a rape, whatever. You get to the bigger things. You don't let those small things go. It seemed to work for Giuliani. It worked. It certainly worked in the sense as to be effective as a U.S. attorney, become a mayor, and then run for president. Fell a little short, but still, he got a lot of mileage out of it.
He did, yeah.
So maybe
at a national level.
And to be fair, maybe there's something to that theory. You think?
I think there is. You know, when I came into office in 2007 and up until now, I've put together groups of people, volunteer-based, in my ward where we focus on graffiti, which is a huge problem, whether it's gang-related or otherwise. And we make sure we try to get that stuff done as quickly as we can to kind of look at it in a way of that broken windows theory so that it's not a blight on the neighborhood. And I think people appreciate that. And if we catch more of these taggers, which we do very often, I go to court very often, I ask the judges to give me those people who we catch, and they do community service. And I'll tell you what, most of those guys, once they do community service with us, they don't go back to tagging or some of the smaller crimes that they're committing. But you have to stay focused on it constantly.
So what's the solution on the flash mobs? What do you do there? Has the city now got that under control, do you think? Or is that, as the weather gets warmer, is that going to become more and more of a problem?
I think it's going to be more of a problem as the summer months come up. The response from the police has been decent, but it hasn't stopped them in the past. You know, you mentioned I just had a new baby. We were at the hospital a couple weekends ago when another one of those flash mob hit, and you know the sirens were going off. You could hear everything just very chaotic, and I don't think they had it under control the way they should. I think they need to crack down on it a lot harder. I think they need to pinch them before they commit some of these events that they go through. I wouldn't even call them.
They need to pinch them, did you say?
Well, I think when they see a crowd of 10, 20, 30 kids gathering and marching down the street and shoving people out of the way, I think they need to swoop in and basically take them right off the street right there and say,
Make some arrests, is that what you mean?
make some arrests. Well, if they haven't broken the law, they can't arrest
When
them.
you say take them off the street, what do you mean by take them off
Take
the
them aside,
street? Tell them
talk
to
to them,
disperse,
what are you
get them
doing? If you
dispersed.
don't-
If they haven't broken the law, don't arrest them. If they have, arrest them.
Right.
But get the crowd dispersed. They're not allowed legally to just assemble as a mob, is what you're saying.
right, or if they're shoving people, they can
Right.
they can move in pretty quickly.
Okay, without necessarily arresting them, but at least warning them to say, you guys are coming close
If
to
they're
breaking the law."
juveniles, yeah, you can take them aside, and if they're breaking curfew,
Okay.
if they're out late, all sorts of things.
All right. Going back to violence in general, though, it seemed you want to talk about, well, you talk about safe areas, we're talking about closing of the schools.
Yeah.
What's your thinking on the closing of the schools? Was it the right thing for the Chicago Public Schools to close? Is it 60 schools they've closed?
Well, it's
Or
going to be
not-
54.
50, it will be 54. It's not final, but it seems pretty likely
It's
that's
pretty
to be the number.
pretty likely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it the right thing?
No, I don't think so. I think the problem we have right now is that we're being torn in different directions by CPS leadership. If you look at the fact that we've had multiple leaders in a 5-year period, there's nobody at the head of the ship that's saying, here's the direction we need to go over the next, say, 10 years or so, have a long-term plan. Even in my own ward, I find I have problems with CPS where I'm getting conflicting directions about where we should be going because there's different factions within CPS headquarters that either want to spend money or want to take the schools in one direction or another, and there's no one at the helm saying, let's put a stop to things for a little while, let's look at where we need to go.
When you say no one at the helm, wouldn't that be the CPS CEO, Barbara Bird Bennett?
That's correct, yeah.
Now, what you're saying she's not doing her job, or what? When you say there's no one there?
Well, I think when, we had 2 schools back in 2009, 2010 that they put on the closure list without any warning. When I went into those schools originally, we looked at the leadership in the schools, we looked at the support that they were getting from CPS. It was very minimal. The people who were supposed to be helping direct which direction those schools needed to be going in were non-existent. They were working for CPS, but they never showed up. There was a lot of confusion. Basically, we came in and said, we're going to show you which direction we want to go. We want to improve these schools. When you take the 2 schools that I had in my ward and you extrapolate it to those 54, I can see exactly what's going on. And the same thing was happening with a couple hundred of schools that we saw happening with my 2. When we look to 2013, just a few years later, the 2 schools that we had problems with are now seeing increased enrollment, increased participation from parents in the neighborhood and businesses, and increased scores across the board.
Where were those schools located?
One was called Prescott and one was Hamilton. One was in West Lakeview and the other one was in Lincoln Park.
Okay, and do you know the percentage of kids, black kids, was that a K through 5 school or K through 8?
K through 8.
K through 8.
Both of them.
So
yeah.
black kids, it has a substantial black population there, right?
I think they were pretty mixed. They're white, Hispanic, and black.
Okay, maybe equally mixed, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3?
Roughly, but maybe a little off, yeah.
If you asked what percentage of the black kids in 4th grade were reading at grade level at Prescott, do you have an idea what the answer would be?
At this time,
No, at the
that
time before it was fixed.
At that time, I think they were pretty well across. They were doing pretty well across the board.
Like, give me a number. What do you think it would be? What's pretty well?
I'd say 80% of them were at the level that they should be.
Okay, but I hear, you know Robin Staines?
No.
She's the head of an organization called Advance Illinois.
Okay.
It's an education reform organization. She spent a lot of time studying this. She herself was a teacher, law degree from the University of Chicago, bright woman. She's told me, when I pushed her really to get the number, I said, what percentage of kids read at grade level, black kids, CPS? She said about 20%. There's some qualifications and caveats to get there.
Sure.
Does that sound right to you? Across the board now, CPS.
I don't know. I'd have to. I wouldn't
Do you think it would
disagree
be
with
much,
what
Do you think
she's.
it would be much higher? Do you think it would be 80% across the board?
I don't think it's probably
It
at
could be
80%.
80. Do you think it might be 60?
50, 60 maybe.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that. I think the CPS might try to tell you that. I'm going with Robin Staines on this one, 20%, okay? That's a major problem.
It
Even
is.
Prescott wasn't there 2 years ago, were they? They
In
weren't
2009, they probably weren't.
maybe 40%. You had to do some things. Now you're getting up to 60, 70 or something. This is like a major endemic problem. And here's my question. I know the show is about my guest, but my question, why isn't the Progressive Caucus up in arms about this? Ricky Munoz has been an alderman for how many years? Like for
18,
yeah,
20
I can't
years.
remember when he wasn't,
Yeah.
like forever. And he's a part of your caucus, right?
Right. He's probably the oldest member of the caucus. Most
Why
of us are
isn't
pretty
he
new.
upset about that? I mean, the Hispanic number might be larger. Maybe it's 25 or 30%. I think that Hispanics are outperforming blacks on that level. But still, I'd love to have Ricky come on and tell me, and we'll try to have him on, because you know him. Why isn't he upset? Why doesn't he wake up in the morning and say, damn it, I want to do something about that? Because I don't think he does. Instead, he wakes up in the morning and he's upset that they're closing schools. Now, these schools, they're saying they're doing it because they're low utilization. But here's the little secret. Barbara Bird Bennett and I know, you know, and everybody listening to this, they're also low performers. Okay? They don't want to say that. It's a sensitive subject. Okay? But I asked Barbara Bird Bennett several months ago when she was worried just coming in, what's the percentage of kids reading at grade level, black kids, 4th grade? 20%? She said, sounds right. She was so focused on closing schools, she wasn't sure. I'm just worried. Barbara Bird Bennett, Ricky Munoz, to be fair, Scott Waguespack, Alderman Powar. Why aren't you guys all concerned? I mean, why? I don't sense the urgency. If I told you you had 5 kids in your family and you had a 1 in 5 shot that one of them would read at grade level and the other 4 wouldn't, you wouldn't be too happy, right?
Right.
Why do you tolerate this?
I actually don't tolerate it, and I've been pretty outspoken on
What
it.
have you done in your 6 years there as alderman to turn that around?
I have regular principal meetings. We talk about best practices. We talk about the best ways to make sure that each one of our schools shows a lot of the other ones out there that they can perform the same way that we're performing in our ward. I do have a lot of top 10, what I think are top 10 schools, not only in the city, but elsewhere. And I think what we're trying to do, and especially with our Progressive Caucus, is yes, we have been talking about the closings and saying, look, we need a moratorium on it. But I don't want a moratorium just to say, stop the closings. What I've talked about over the last couple of years was show me the direction that we should be going and include the best practices so that all the schools across the city get to the level that I think a lot of my schools are at.
And who do you say that to?
I say it to CPS leadership.
Who at CPS have you said that to?
I've talked to basically, I haven't spoken to Barbara Bird Bennett. I've spoken to many of her assistants, some of them who have been there for many years. As I mentioned before, there's different factions within CPS that kind of want to go in their own directions, new
Did you
schools
say
programs.
it to J.C. Broussard? Broussard was there for 18 months.
I did.
Did you talk to him? You said
I
that?
did.
What did J.C. say?
He was actually looking at sending his kids to one of the top performing schools in my ward
No,
in
but
the
that's
city.
that's your word.
And I said,
and that's what I'm trying to get at. Who gives a rat's ass in power about the west side and south side failing schools? We keep coming back to your ward, and I understand that's your main
Right.
focus. But you are a Chicago city councilman.
Right.
And Rahm Emanuel is mayor of the city of Chicago. Now, just tell me, have you talked with Rahm?
Yes.
Did you ever say, Rahm, why the hell don't you do anything? Because 2 years, Rahm, what have you done so that that lousy statistic, 1 out of every 5 kids is reading at grade level who's black in the 4th grade gets better? Because this guy Berkowitz is driving me nuts. Just driving me nuts, Rahm.
And I think
what am I going to tell Berkowitz when he asks, what are you going to tell me that Rahm said he's doing to deal with that problem?
Well, I think Rahm's viewpoint is just like Barbara Bird Bennett. It's close those schools, and then we'll focus on the other ones. My viewpoint is hold off on closing those schools and let's focus on those. Just like, what I'm saying is, I've gotten to the point with mine where I can trust what the principals are doing, what the neighborhoods are doing, and I think they are a model for what the rest of the city should be. So that allows me to go to these other schools and talk to principals, talk to the kids.
You're a role model.
I think I am.
Your ward is a role model.
I think I am.
Your role model is an alderman.
And that allows me to spend more time working on those other schools.
So one day, people thought, and you thought you might run for mayor last time around 2011, right?
It crossed my mind because of the way the city was, the direction it was going.
So by doing this, going to ward to ward to ward, spreading the word, the gospel, is that setting up a run for mayor, possibly?
No, I don't. I haven't thought about it this time around. I think we.
But is it? And I don't say that like it's a bad thing. If your concerns and your interests want to say take what you've done that you think was good in the 32nd ward and now spread it around, that's not a bad thing. Some people say, okay, but somebody has to be mayor. And wouldn't it be good to have somebody as mayor who's had some experience and history of having concerns broader than his or her ward, right?
I think you have to.
Right.
Yeah.
So in a sense, you shouldn't be so quick to dismiss that, right?
Well, and I think that's where I've tried to reach out to a lot of different people throughout the city. You have a Black caucus, Hispanic caucus, you have the 2 progressive caucuses. I don't think the caucuses in themselves have all the answers. I think you have to work with a broad coalition of people across the city. I know you believe in school choice. When I look at the number of Catholic schools, private schools, charter schools that I have in my ward, when I say we sit down with the principals in my ward and we talk about best practices, the best practices come from CPS, they come from those other schools. We put everybody at the table.
Okay, but how are the charter schools doing in your ward?
They're doing fair. They're not.
You don't think
they're not doing
you don't
better
think they
than,
outperform the traditional public schools?
I would say they're sitting at about the halfway mark in my ward. So they're outperforming a couple of them, but not all of them.
They're in the middle.
They're in the middle.
On average, they don't outperform. On the average, they're in the middle.
Citywide, I haven't seen specifically, but I think it's probably about right.
You know this book we keep mentioning by Herb Wahlberg called School Choice: The Findings, written in 2007, where he didn't just study Chicago, but he's looked at charter schools around the country. Mm-hmm. He says, on average, charter schools outperform traditional public schools. You ever read Mr. Wahlberg's book?
No, I haven't.
Would you be willing to take a look at it?
Yeah, I'll read anything.
All right, here you are.
Thanks. Is that the shortened version?
No, it's the same. It's just a little. It's I think basically the same. It's just a smaller print. Okay. One more book for you. Okay. Milton Friedman, Capitalism and Freedom. Read that book?
No.
Would you take a look at that?
I would. Yeah.
Because he came up with school vouchers about 50, 60 years ago,
mm-hmm.
and it's mentioned in that book as well. And the fundamental concept here is competition. I mean, you believe in competition, right?
Yes.
And so we spend $15,000 per kid per year. It's not a paltry sum in the Chicago public schools. It's easy. 400,000 kids, $6 billion budget, divide one into the other, it's 15,000, right? Hard to dispute that, right?
That's how you work out the numbers.
All right, so give people in your district, in your ward, but all other wards, 15,000. Say if you're happy with the public school, stay there. If not, you get to go to the private school of your choice. For those people who are closing your school, you now have a new option. You can go to the welcoming school, but if somebody wants to come up and put a school up that's closer to you, that says they'll focus on teaching your kids how to read, so maybe they get 60% to read at grade level, not 20% like the CPS, and you want to give it that shot, take a shot. Would you like to empower those parents to have that choice to go to the school of their choice?
I think where I'm at, yeah, they do, and a lot of people. A lot of people in my ward actually do go. They make that choice. They do go.
Well, they can't now because they can't take they can't take those public funds out. They have to take their hard-earned money. They still get that money stays in the public school system. Mm-hmm. Would you like to allow them to take their pro rata share, that $15,000, to go to the school of their choice?
Well, what I'd like to see first is CPS fixed. I'd like to make sure that the money that people are spending in their taxes is spent appropriately.
17 years we've had reform is not working. Don't you think it's time for a change? Barack Obama said that he ran on change. You're not opposed to change, right?
No, but
give these parents that shot. Give them their choice, right?